Welcome to a OneStrand Fast Snapshot web series. This week's session will be on R4i DMX or Data Module Exchange. My name is Tammy Holter. I will be hosting the session today with Miss Rita Nye running through the snapshot of R4i DMX. Welcome, Rita.
Thank you, Tammy.
This session today will run for approximately 15 minutes and the recordings will automatically be made available on our Skills MyCast portal for customers to access at any time for reference material. So kicking off today, the purpose of R4i DMX as a tool is to, of course, automate conversion of S1000D data modules, and the conversion process we're talking about is from one S1000D series to another. The product happens to perform an upgrade from issue 3 up to any of the 4 series, or if you're on a 4 series to another 4 series, so 4.0 through to 4.2 for example.
Correct.
So that's what's the purpose of the tool. What we're going to see in your demo today, Rita, is you're going to take a look at how we start and connect the product to the license service, because that's important, because it actually uses a conversion. So every time it converts a data module, it does a connection and grabs one of the licenses, because you can buy batches of data module conversions.
Correct.
And so we'll have a look at how you do that process, how you start connect, and a general overview of the interface. Obviously setting up your conversion settings and target versions, so you know what are we starting with, what are we going to, and what are some of the specific settings that you want to put in place, because particularly from the V3 series there was quite a bit of difference, and there are things you will have to configure and set. And then running a conversion, we'll just see how that works and how that hits the licensing server. And once the conversion has been successful, it actually obviously does a countdown on some of those the licensed conversions that you've purchased. On that note, I will hand over the screen to you, Rita, to kick off the overview of the DMX tool.
Okay, so what you'll see is R4i Data Module Exchanger. So it's just a shortcut on my desktop. When I double click onto that, the logon dialog box displays. So similar to what we do with R4i CSDB and Writer and such, where we need to physically log into the into some location to be able to access the information. And with this, what we've done is we've linked this to our support portal. So what happens is that you purchase the amount of credits you want,
yes,
to transfer content, and then it's maintained up on the support portal. So you need to make sure that your username and password is available, so you need to remember what your password is, and we are generous enough that we will actually remember your password at this point in time. So once you've entered it in, and then all you do is go connect, and what that will do is it'll actually physically connect to our support portal.
Yes.
So you will need to have internet connectivity to work with this tool. You're not going to be able to be in a standalone environment.
Right, yep.
Okay, and what will happen is Data Module Exchange Manager will then load, and this is what you'll be presented with. Now, because I've already been using the tool, it doesn't always automatically display this because it's actually got some settings already configured.
Yes.
So when it first loads, you'll see that there's nothing here.
Blank. Yep.
It's all blank.
Yep.
So what we've got with this is, first of all, if we look at our general section, first of all, it'll tell you how many credits you've got. So when you purchase, so how many
licenses, if you think you're going to convert about 1,000 files,
then you can get that number of credits available to you.
Yes.
We do have a log file so that you can have a look at what's happened during the processing time. Update credit, we'll just simply go and check with the server to see how many credits you currently have.
To do a refresh,
So if you've purchased more, then if you've been sitting inside the tool, you can just click on update credit.
Just to refresh
and it'll just refresh and show you the number of credits you've got available. The settings window, this is where we start to do our first part of our configuration of DMX. So there's 2 tabs to this. We've got the General tab and then the ID Status tab. So the General tab is where we've got to start setting all of these paths. Where does this data all live? So we've got a source directory or a source folder. So this is physically where is that source content that you're working with that you want to have converted. You've then got an output folder, which is where are we going to physically write the content to?
Yep, so the new version 4, for instance,
Yep. If there's any data modules that are invalid, we'll move them to the invalid folder section.
Yep, important to know.
And the process folder, so once the content has been processed from your source directory, it'll go to your process directory.
Ah, okay, right, yep. Because you might want to still keep those version 3s. Yep.
Yep, we're not going to affect the source files.
Yep.
We're just going to physically move them.
Once we know, okay, you've been done, it just keeps moving them.
It just keeps moving them. Okay, and we can also see that we're writing the log file out.
Nice.
Okay, then we also start to need to know some of the default measurements, because inside version 3 and below, it wasn't as controlled with what some of the measurement controls were. So to be able to do that, we need to then mark up what's our default measurement or unit of measurement that we're going to put into it. So if it's not defined anywhere in the UOM attributes,
tell us what we should list it as.
Correct. So you get the choice to be either an asterisk, point, centimetre, millimetre, PI or inch.
Yep.
So you can choose which one is most relevant to your needs.
And obviously customers' business rules or whatever you're delivering to would probably be appropriate there again, that if, you didn't have specific settings in the V3, what's the rules for V4?
Correct. So you've got to go through that process. And then what are we going to do if the file exists already? So again, remembering that you should only have one of each
data module,
but anything's possible. So what do we want to do if the file already exists? So the choices are either to overwrite, rename or skip the file. Your choice.
And that sort of thing is reported obviously in the log. Yeah.
Correct. And then we've just got some miscellaneous settings. So we've got to move successful files. So we won't do anything with a file
unless it's converted.
Unless it's physically converted.
Yep.
And we can also mark to say ignore any invalid warnings. So again, because we're using the bike samples as our core criteria for conversion, and of course, especially if we're looking at some of the older versions of version 2 content, which we don't encourage to use with this tool at this stage, there may be some configuration items that you put into those older versions
that are not actually valid.
That are not valid anymore.
Yep.
So what are we going to do if that content is currently invalid? And, things like applicability, it changed so dramatically, especially in version 2 to version 3 / version 4 and above.
You might be happy to ignore the warnings. You know that you're going to have those items in your data when you finish the conversion.
Yep.
And you're going to do something with it.
Because we're not going to guarantee 100% conversion. There is still going to be that requirement for you to verify the data in whatever mechanism that you're going to use.
Yeah, because things do change between the versions and some things you just can't allow for.
Absolutely. So again, we go through that choice. Then, of course, we need to identify what are we doing with the ID status block. So we've looked at some of the core requirements of the ID status block and went, okay, so what are we doing with this? So the first one is the issue date.
Yeah, good point. If we're doing a batch conversion, do we change it? Yep. Do we want a date? Do we want an issue number? Like, what are we doing? Yep.
So again, we can have it set up that we can update it. And if we do, what date do we want to set it to? We've also got our quality assurance for our QA setting. So again, are we setting it to unverified? Are we setting it to first verification? We're doing first verification. What attribute are we setting it to? Basic questions that you need to think about. Yeah,
all of a sudden we're actually physically changing our data modules. And
then we've got issue number and in work. So are we issuing all of those?
Project decision. Yep.
Having to have all that knowledge about what are we doing with this data? How much are we changing? And it then, of course, comes to security classification.
Yep, all the rest of the classic things that you would put in your ID status.
And then we've also got the originator and the RPC, because you're
who we're listing.
Who is it? Who's responsible for this? And, of course, you've got your reason for update.
Yep.
What are we doing with this? All of this information needs to be configured. So it's not just a simple process of grab this data and throw it through the processing.
You have to make some project decisions.
You have to make project decisions to identify what are we physically doing with this content.
Some clear decisions have to be made.
So we can do some general ID status block
settings, yep,
inside here. Once we've made all of those, we simply save it. And if this was the first time I'd opened up and set all my pathing, if I then clicked onto the refresh, this folder here on the left, the source file section,
yep,
it would then get populated.
Right, okay.
Because prior to that, it has no knowledge of anything.
So, empty screen, but once we've set where we're looking for files, once you refresh it, it's going to go have a scan and see if you've got some files sitting in there.
Correct. Okay, then we have our versions. So which version? So we're not as expansive with this as we are with other versions.
Yep.
So if you refer back to our previous session, our little
IPD manager.
IPD manager, where we went for all patch versions.
Yes.
With DMX, we only do for 4.01, 4.1 and 4.2.
Because they have been the most popular, those ones. Yeah.
Correct.
So if people are, converting from 3, generally it's like, oh, we've got to go to 4.01 or we've got to go to 4.2. So,
correct.
Yeah.
So we haven't gone through and
put all the patch.
All the patch options.
Yeah.
We've just focused on the core
that have been
variants.
Common. Yep.
Okay, so you simply choose which one you want and it will then identify. So you can now see that it's identified that the version we're going to convert to is 4.2. Okay, so with this, we've got a couple different ways that we can physically run the tool.
Okay.
So with that, we can either select a particular file. So if you just wanted to run
single file test, right? Okay.
Yep. Do a single file.
Yep.
If we select a folder, that means that we're choosing a folder other than our source directory that we've already predefined.
Okay, so a manual one off. Okay,
Yep. Okay, refresh as I said, so we've done there. Clear just means that
clear
the logs.
Yep.
View process log just allows you to view the data, see what's happened.
Yep.
And to actually physically run it,
click the button.
Click the button. Now what happens is your ID status setting information still displays, because at this point in time, what are we doing? So even though we may have configured some of this
done pre-configuration, because for one run you might have, okay, we want to set today's date and...
Correct.
Yeah, okay.
So you can see here that the only things that we can really update is the issue date and the RFU.
Which are pretty classic ones, right, you want to do on the spot. Yeah.
Correct. Okay, so we've got the choice, we can either save and run or just run.
Okay.
Whichever. I'm just going to do a run, and it's now processing that content, and you can see that as it's processing, it's deducting my credits.
Okay, and so these are only on a successful conversion, right?
Correct. So
because that was the option we chose. Yep.
Yep. Okay, so it will then go through and give you any of the information, and it'll also highlight any of the files that you've had issues with, and you can view that content. So you can go through and actually see some more information. But you can see here that my credits have now gone from 945 down to 892. So it's physically deducted the number of credits for the ones that have been successfully converted.
So going back to the settings that you had there, Rita, on, the option on do I want to convert an invalid file. So very much the scenario for that is, as you said, there may be some scenarios that you actually know the source file were potentially invalid as well.
Correct.
Or there's specific things that are going to end up converted that are acceptable as a conversion. If we go, it's an invalid file, we'll class it as it's not a converted, we won't take a credit, but we won't leave the file there for you either. If you're happy with, no, I'm good with that, I know it's invalid right now, I'm going to get an invalid one at the other end and I know how to fix that, so please process it, you would tick that option and it would go, okay, I'm happy to leave the invalid files in the output directory and I'm going to take your credit. But otherwise, if it's not a successful conversion, it doesn't go into the folder and you don't have a credit taken away.
Correct. So yes, so we then go through and list all of that information. So you can see that with that we ended up with 2 files that weren't converted.
Yes.
So we know that those 2, we can go back into...
Have a look at them. What's wrong with them?
Yeah. And we can start to identify what's the problem with them. So it's very much knowing what your source data is.
Yep.
And knowing what's going to happen when it gets converted to whatever version you're selecting.
Yep.
It's that analysis process.
Yep.
So it's not just the, just run it through and see what it does. It's actually understanding your content and know where it's going to go from to.
And I guess a possibility, right, is we might go grab those V3s, go open them in something like R4i Writer so that we can get the errors, actually, take a look at,
Correct.
What are all the schema errors that are in it? Oh, okay, they're probably okay. I'll deal with them when I get them to the other side. And so you rerun with I'll take the invalid ones, thanks, and then you'll clean them up over in 4.2 and move from there. So
it's just the process of being of knowing your data.
Yeah, and I guess that, for first off, I'd probably go with don't process the invalid ones, give me that list, and then I'll go handle those and come back to what I want to do with them. But at least I've got the clean ones.
Yes, so it gives you that option to be able to at least identify what's happening, and then, if we looked at that content, you'd then find that content has now been converted, but we've still got those original source files. So we're not physically renaming the files that you've got, we're physically creating brand new files based on the criteria that you've specified.
Yep.
So it's very much that side of it. So yes, so it's a very simple process. It's just being able to identify what needs to be done.
Excellent. So thank you for running that session on R4i DMX. That is the second of the Fast Snapshot series for our webinar sessions, where we're doing short webinar product reviews rather than the lengthy 45-minute ones. These allow people to get more in-depth than our 3-minute videos that are up on, of course, YouTube, but not having to attend a 45-hour-long session.
45-minute.
Yes,
45 hour.
That's right, 45-minute to 1 hour long session. Exactly, that's right. So thank you for showing us R4i DMX today, and next week's session will be on R4i Binder's SCORM module. So one that we don't have too many people, certainly in the past asked on a day-to-day basis, but we've had a lot of people asking us about the SCORM module recently, so wanting to reuse their content. So we'll have a look at that one in our next series. Thank you again, Rita, and we look forward to seeing everyone at next week's session.